And I'm honored to be your MC this evening. We've got a lot to cover. We have a lot to cover in the next couple hours, so we're going to jump right in. And let's begin by standing and joining in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. A couple quick housekeeping details. Make note, there are at least 3 marked exits, so take a look around you and just make sure you know where your closest exits are. The restrooms are out the main doors here at the front and just outside. And phones, we're not asking that you turn your phones off. In fact, we actually encourage you to do a little texting or tweeting or posting on social media as we go through the event if you're so inclined. But we would ask that you put your ringers to silent. We want this, let me talk a little bit about format. We want the event to be as interactive as possible. So we've come up with a few ways for you to participate, and I'll talk briefly about those. Let me advance. So I don't know, you may have trouble seeing some of the lower portions of these slides, so I'll try to talk through them. First of all, you'll see that you have a red and a green card on your seat. Each seat should have one. Everybody in the audience should have one. If you don't, wave your hand and we'll get them to you. Okay? So we have a few we need back here. All right. So somebody's working on that. We'll get those to you here shortly. As we move through the evening, we're going to have some polling questions. So we'll ask you what your feelings are about certain issues, and the cards are the way that you can express your opinions, either pro or con. So you hold up the red card if you reject the idea in question, or the green card if you support it or accept it. In addition, the online registration forms that I think virtually all of you must have filled out provided an opportunity for you to pose your questions in advance. And we did receive quite a few of those. We won't be able to get through all of them tonight, but we have included many of them in the program. And we will be asking our panelists to weigh in and help educate us on these topics. In addition, we're live streaming the event on several social media platforms, and we're also live tweeting and posting. So again, we encourage you to feel free to do that as the evening goes on. If you decide to post on social media about the event, please use the hashtag Anita Listens. And if you forget that, you'll note that it's on every slide. However, it's low on the slide, so you probably won't be able to see it. So I will, from periodically remind you it's hashtag Anita Listens. So if you would include those in your post, that would be great. And we'll also be pulling some questions in from social media as if time permits. And finally, the most important piece, we want to hear from you, our live audience here with us tonight. You will have the opportunity to ask questions at a microphone that we have, a fixed microphone that's over there. And Doug, wave your hand so people can see where the microphone is located off to the side. So what we're asking you to do is line up over there. If you have questions that you want to ask on any subject that we're talking about, or even those that we're not. And we will try to get to as many of your questions as we can as the program unfolds. And then in addition to that, we have a roving mic, at least one, maybe two, roving mics that will be circulating around. Shanae here, waving her arm, is going to have the mic, and she will, if you want to make a comment as opposed to ask a question, you just raise your hand, and Shanae will bring the mic to you, and you'll be able to pose or make your comment. And we ask that you hold your comments to about 1 minute in length for the sake of time. And again, we may not get to everybody's question, but please note that Anita will be available when we wrap up the meeting tonight at 8 o'clock. She will be available at her table and will personally respond to questions, and any questions that don't get answered, she will personally follow up with those answers after the program. If we have time left over, we would like to give you the opportunity to ask multiple questions, a second question, but for now, we'd like you to hold your questions just to make sure we get as many in as possible. Keep your questions to just one question each, and then if we do have extra time at the end of the meeting, we will, of course, encourage people to ask second questions. And I think the last thing I want to just mention, goes without saying, of course, but in the spirit of making this a constructive and productive discussion, we ask that questions and participants be respectful throughout the evening. Okay. Next, let's introduce you to our outstanding group of panelists. We're fortunate to have leaders in several critical fields with us tonight, and they will be updating us on their areas of expertise and involvement, as well as responding to your questions and comments. However, they are not limited to their particular area of expertise or involvement. They can, if they're so inclined, they want to respond to a question outside their immediate area of expertise, they're welcome to do that as well. So, and again, I'll talk through these. Our first panel, starting left and to your left and moving right, is Pooja Babra. And Pooja is a former healthcare technology executive and now works as a consultant for the healthcare industry. Her current focus is on prescription price transparency, and she recently testified on this topic in front of the Senate Special Committee on Aging. Next, we have Doug Brunke. Doug is CEO of Global Chamber, which is dedicated to helping companies grow locally and globally. Doug is an international marketer, cross-border growth expert, consultant, speaker, collaborator, and connector, general connector. So anyway, we're glad to have Doug on board. Of course, everybody knows the person in the center, Anita Malik. So no further introduction required there. Brian Messinas is, he serves as the advocacy lead for the Arizona Youth Climate Strike, a youth-led and grassroots environmental activism group composed of middle school, high school, and college students from across Arizona. And I got the pleasure of hearing Brian speak to the LD23 Democrats meeting last month, and he is outstanding, and I'm sure you'll all agree by the end of the night that he has a tremendous future ahead of him. And Brian's current focus is on the climate action plan being developed and presented in Tempe, and he is also pushing for a more progressive version in line with the UN's IPCC report. And finally, we have Geneva Haber, and Geneva is a passionate gun violence prevention advocate and volunteer with Moms Demand Action. Geneva, right. Geneva believes that students, teachers, and faculty go to school to learn and teach, and they should be able to do so without worrying about the threat of gun violence in their hallways and classrooms, and I think we all agree. So we want to give each of these great panelists a few minutes to update us on what's happening in their respective areas and how it affects us here in Congressional District 6 or federally, and how we may be able to get involved. And so, Anita, if you don't mind, would you like to kind of lead through this section of the program?
Welcome, everyone.
It's the button to the left. Kind of press with your fingernail.
Yeah, I think we got this one. Okay,
There we
thank you,
go.
Brian. See? Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here. I was reflecting today on how next week it will actually be 2 years since I started this journey. And it's a journey for change for CD6, but it's also a journey to get David Schweikert out of office. So,
Yeah.
and the reason we are here today, yes, green cards, I like that. The reason we are here today is because what I consistently heard on that journey in the last cycle, and what I experienced as a longtime resident here under his representation, is this. This doesn't happen. This conversation does not happen. And so I am so grateful for all of you to have come here today, to participate in this conversation, to make our voices be heard collectively. And I'm grateful for these panelists. And I want to explain why it was important for me to have these individuals and others like them as a part of this conversation. Because I believe in leadership that's not about one person streaming ahead. And in the case of David Schweikert, he's not a leader in this way. Anyways, he just follows the Freedom Caucus. But I believe in leadership that brings the best voices to the table from all across the district. That it's about the community, that's about the different concerns we have and from about different industries. And so these individuals have amazing insights that will help me lead and will also help us together collectively get to where we need to go, which is a better path. And I know, and I'm not trying to speak for them, but I know we are all here not just to give our input, but we are all here as they go back into their fields and back into their expertise in areas in the community. They're here to listen. So please share. And so I will let them take over now, and I think we're starting with Pooja.
Great, thank you, Anita. Thank you all for joining us, and thank you to Anita and her team for actually holding a town hall for us here in AZ-06. So let's talk healthcare briefly. For the first couple of years of this administration, I would say healthcare policy was challenging. It just seemed like every day we were waking up to someone or the other that was saying, I'm going to dismantle the Affordable Care Act, we're going to repeal the Affordable Care Act, and we were constantly texting and calling our senators and really doing anything we could to try to make our voices heard. And luckily, we were. And I think we can all thank our own Senator, John McCain, for his famous thumbs down, which I think we're all going to remember for that, right? Which was a huge, huge win. And so since then, the nice thing is in Washington, things have become a little more bipartisan on the healthcare side, mainly on the prescription side. And I want to talk a few minutes just about kind of what's happening. There's a couple topics that we're seeing some real bipartisan support, and that's for lowering prescription prices and making it more transparent. There have been actually 4 bills that have been introduced prior to the break where folks are actually looking and figuring out and peeling back the onion to say what is actually causing higher prescription pricing and what can we do about it. And the nice thing is it actually does have bipartisan support. Here locally, there's a couple of things that we've been kind of working on and focused on, and primarily the opioid crisis. And, you know, I don't know about you guys, but there's a lot of people who are affected by that crisis. And here locally, we've actually passed a couple of laws, one being that you have to send an opioid prescription electronically now. You can't walk into a pharmacy with a piece of paper, which really helps with fraud and abuse. The other thing is if you're getting a tooth surgery, you no longer need, I mean, you don't need 30 pills if you're just getting a tooth surgery, right? 7 pills is the limit. So just yesterday, Health and Human Services announced a $1.8 billion aid package for the states to continue the fight for the opioid crisis. So, you know, I feel that we've done a lot here in Arizona, and we're actually going to have money to do more. And then finally, just to kind of close it out, one thing that I've actually personally been working on is to make it more transparent to all of us what our medication is actually going to cost at the pharmacy counter. Until last year, if there was a way for you to get a prescription cheaper, a pharmacist could actually legally not tell you that. They could actually see it on their screen, but they could get fined for telling you that, oh, if you pay cash or if you go to another pharmacy, you can actually get this cheaper. And that regulation was lifted last year. And so what we're working on now is to try to make it more transparent for you as a consumer and for us as patients to actually know what we're going to pay at the pharmacy so we don't get sticker shock, first of all, and also to find out maybe it's cheaper for me to pay cash. Maybe I don't have to have this covered through my insurance. And maybe if I go to the pharmacy down the street as the one that I go to normally, I can actually get it cheaper. So lots of things happening. I know there's lots of frustration around healthcare as well, but I'm excited to hear, you know, stories from everyone and bring that back for the work that I'm doing around the prescription price transparency and just, you know, allowing people to get more information about their healthcare needs. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Doug Brunke of Global Chambers, so thank you for the introduction. And I really want to applaud Anita for having the vision to have someone talking about global, because global is kind of a scary word, right? We think of outsourcing and all bad things. Local is warm and fuzzy, but global is pretty scary. But actually, it's really important. And so when Anita asked me to say a few words about what's going on, I segmented it into a couple minutes of what's good, what's bad, and what Mr. Schweikert's really screwing up. So on the good side, there are actually some good things going on. You know, Japanese people love Americans, and so the trade deal that we just did with Japan is a really good thing. We should have done TPP, but you know, this is a second best thing. NAFTA and USMCA, that's actually a good thing between Canada, Mexico, and the US to work together to basically kind of face off against the world. Those things are all good for the most part. So the work, which is bipartisan, is good, and should pass. I heard we had a presentation early this morning, 99% probability of passing within the next year, and I think I believe that. Another good thing that's just generally happening is, you know, the world still loves America. They loved President Obama. They love John McCain. They love democracy and our fight for democracy, and that's being tested in a couple different ways. And they love U.S. products and services. They really want to buy from America. Africa is a great example where China is investing very heavily. The Africans would rather work with Americans, quite honestly, and so we have a lot of work to do there. So those are the good things. So the bad things, there's a little bit of a longer list. So America first. So any Chinese person who hears America first means, oh, you're against me, or actually anybody around the world. So that's not a good start for anybody to go out into the world. America first is a terrible strategy. Yeah, we should be looking at American goods, and we should feel really proud about what we are and what we do, but you don't tell the world that the only thing we care about is America first. There's actually a Twitter post from the Chinese government today that basically says, I was going to read it, but I won't. It says, you know, the Western powers, all they care about is themselves, and you need to follow us. So that's kind of the China strategy. And by the way, we had a China strategy with TPP to edge out China in Asia. 85% of the deals in the world are happening outside the U.S. Make America Great, back in the 50s and 60s, 40% of the world's business was in the U.S. We could rely on ourselves. Now only 15% is here, so we have to go somewhere else. We have to sell our goods in other places. That's why TPP was so important, and when Trump got rid of that, that was not a good thing. So the Chinese are actually working against us in a very deep way with the Belt and Road Initiative. They're basically telling their own people, look, they're killing each other there in the U.S., and they're doing crazy stuff. They just do things in the world that suits themselves, America first, So they're telling their own people that to turn them against American products, and they're telling places like Kazakhstan and other countries not to buy American products because those are crazy people. So that's not a good thing. We have the largest federal deficit we've ever had. We've also had the largest trade deficit we've ever had. So that's not a good thing, because especially the federal deficit's financed by China. Go figure. The Russia thing, let's not even go there, right? That's just terrible. And election security is a key thing, and we need election security, because we know if people really, the actual result happens in 2020, we'll get what we want, but we have to have secure election. And then finally, tourism. Believe it or not, tourism is down. Chinese or any international students in the U.S. is down for the very first time. It was always the dream of everybody to come to the United States to go to college here, and it still is for a lot of people, but it's actually down for the first time ever, and we can imagine why. And so I'd like to close with just some things that are somewhat random, but sort of kind of anti-Schweikert. Like, I was looking at his voting record, is like, really? You did that? Seriously? So the Exim Bank, the Export-Import Bank, helps companies fund exporting. We want exporters in the U.S. We send our products and they send money to us. We use that money to build schools and roads. There's nothing bad about that. He voted against the Exim Bank. I can't even believe it, but he did. He also voted against humanitarian standards at the border. So the whole thing around international, right, is also the craziness at the border and the craziness with immigration. Anybody who's an immigrant is having a really hard time staying in our country, even though immigrants built over 50% of the Fortune 500 companies. We know that immigrants, no matter what educational level they come to America and they work really hard, and they're much safer, and they commit less crimes, and there's all sorts of things. And yet, Mr. Schweikert is voting against humanitarian aid, and he's voting against he voted for the Muslim ban. He also is voting for corruption. So he voted to repeal the rule that requires energy companies to disclose payments to foreign governments. So he voted, he wants that to allow. In fact, it now is allowed. So energy companies, American energy companies, can pay off officials in other countries and not have to report that back. That always was part of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. That's not the case. So we've got somebody to get rid of. Yeah. And we've got somebody right here that hopefully will be voted for.
Yeah.
Hello. My name is Brian Messinas. Thank you for the introduction earlier, and thank you to Anita Malik for hosting this town hall and allowing for all of us to come here together as a community and discuss the issues that are facing us and the issues that Representative Schweikert have ignored for the essential entirety of his incumbency. So as said, I am the advocacy lead for the Arizona Youth Climate Strike, and when the topic of climate change comes to mind, it's more of a discussion that, we need to figure out what to do. We need to figure out how we can address the issue. And it's more of a discussion where we see climate change as an issue that's very far off and that will become more of an issue in the future. And that is not the case, because in reality, we are at the very beginning and more likely in the middle of a climate and ecological emergency. And we are seeing the effects already across the globe whether it's because of the corporate greed that many corporations and businesses have been enacting all over the world. We see the Amazon rainforest, the lungs of our planet, are on fire. We see in the Bahamas the effects of Hurricane Dorian as they're devastating families and destroying the homes and communities that these people live in. And it's become clear to many people, especially young people, that our elected officials and the people in power are not mature enough to tell it like it is. If David Schweikert would realize the data that is existing at the climate science, because that's his favorite word, data. Most of you have come to notice that probably. I've grown up in this district my whole life, and I started following his Twitter. That's probably a word that's beginning to ingrained in my head now, data, data, data. Yet he doesn't seem to be listening to the data at hand about the climate crisis. And that is the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has given us until 2030 to drastically reduce our emissions of greenhouse gases across the globe as well. And the United States for long has been such a leader on the global and international stage that we should be leading this fight against the climate crisis, but yet we're not. Representative Schweikert, the Trump administration, and their many conservative lawmakers have been dealing death by 1,000 cuts to our environment in the United States, to the Environmental Protection Agency, and to our wildlife, and to the futures of people my age. I'm 18, if you didn't know, and the children and people of our communities, and the futures that we'll have as well. He's endangering my future, the future of any children I might have, the future of any grandchildren I might have. And for what? To keep money in his own pocket. Right now, we're seeing that elected officials have a choice in front of them, and that is to work tirelessly to defend our futures and secure opportunities for everybody, or don't. They can choose to stand up and reject campaign contributions from the fossil fuel industry and the utility industries that are endangering Arizonans, or they can continue taking them. Right now, Representative Schweikert has made a very obvious choice, and it's become clear to many people, especially in Arizona, that he, alongside many other elected officials, both the city level, the state level, and the federal level, are ignoring the needs of our environment, they're ignoring the needs of our youth, and they're ignoring the future that they're stealing from us every single day they pass without enacting any real climate action to address the issue. So right now, we're seeing that youth all over the world have taken a stand, including myself. I identify as a youth even though I'm 18 because most of the people in this movement are under 25 as well. We're seeing children in India, children in Canada, the United States, all 50 states have stand up, and we are demanding real action from representatives. And we're seeing that here in the United States, at least, the youth are becoming such a big voting bloc. But in reality is, a lot of people, when they come to our events or they come to hear us speak or they come to listen to what we have to say, is comments like, oh, this is so cute, I'm so glad you guys are doing the work you're doing, when in reality, this is not an issue that we should have to be dealing with by ourselves. This is an us issue. This is not just about my future, it's about the future of your children and your grandchildren and your families and here in Arizona and across the world and our existence on this planet as we know it. This is an us issue, but David Schweikert has chosen to leave us behind as he holds himself, I guess, to a lower standard that he believes the rest of us should have to live through. So thank you very much for having me here tonight as well.
So my name's Geneva Haber, and I want to tell you a little bit about the magnitude and impact of gun violence in our country. And I also want to give everyone a chance to do something about it. And I'll give you something concrete that you can do. So the number is 86. 86. When I first started with gun violence prevention advocacy, that was the number that I recall, was the number of deaths every day from gun violence. And now, today, I don't know if you know it, but the number has risen to 100 deaths every day from gun violence. There's also another number to keep in mind because in addition to that, there's hundreds more of people that are shot every day and they survive their wounds. But that's all adds to our number of 36,000 gun deaths and 100,000 non-fatal gun violence every day, for the year. So the increase reflects that not much has happened on the federal level to address our gun violence epidemic. And I believe that's largely because of the, number one, the widespread misinformation campaign propagated by the NRA and the gun lobby. that says gun laws do not make us safer, but that more guns in more places make us safer, which is a myth that they've been propagating. And then number two, they have a stranglehold on our elected officials to do their bidding and to reflect that philosophy in the laws that they've been passing. So they've been writing our gun laws. So gun violence in America, although my call to action to get involved in gun violence prevention was the Sandy Hook mass shooting, I have learned that gun violence has many faces, and I think we should know about them. There is also suicide. 2/3 of gun deaths for that 36,000 number every year are suicides. There's domestic violence. There's unintentional shootings when children get a hold of unsecured guns. And there's so-called everyday gun homicides and assaults that often are taking place in cities and disproportionately affecting Black Americans. One of the figures that I find most disturbing is that firearms are the second leading cause of death for children and teens in the United States. And it's the leading cause for Black children and teens. So what's the impact? Well, surveys have shown that 58% of American adults have experienced or care about somebody that has experienced gun violence in their lifetime. So it's likely that many of you have experienced or know somebody who's experienced gun violence. And if you haven't, perhaps you live in fear when you're out in public. I know you mentioned, the obvious, let's know where the exits are. And I realize that precaution and why it's necessary. Maybe you realize the fear of sending your child to school. Maybe you're purchasing a bulletproof backpack for your child. Maybe you're hearing about active shooter drills when your child comes home. So for all these reasons, that's why I'm calling on everyone here to get off the sidelines and take action. Our best hope for change right now is that at the federal level is for this background check bill that's passed the United States House, and it's waiting in the Senate to be passed. It would require a background check on every gun sale. So in the past 20 years, background checks have blocked 3.5 million sales that they haven't passed because they're not legally able to purchase. And the problem is that there's a loophole that allows private sellers to not perform these background checks. So this bill would rectify that. And our other best hope is a strong red flag or extreme risk protection order to pass at the federal level. And what a red flag law would do would allow family members and law enforcement to petition federal courts to temporarily seize firearms from individuals who are in crisis. So it could be domestic violence, it could be severe mental illness, substance abuse, and it also ensures due process. So we have to keep the pressure on, and we have to keep this issue front and center. Of course, it always spikes after a mass shooting. There's a lot of interest. But we have to keep it on. Everyone needs to take action and also get your friends and family to take action. And the easy way to do that is to text the word CHECKS, CHECKS, to this number, 64433. If you want to jot it down, what will happen is you'll send that text and you'll get a text back asking for your zip code, and then you'll get a call. Your phone will ring, and they'll have an outgoing message telling you that they're going to connect you to one of our senators' offices, and that you should ask them to pass the background check bill that's been waiting since February in the Senate, and also a strong red flag law. 64433. Thank you so much.
Thank you, panelists. Three quick reminders again. If you're texting or, if you're posting or tweeting, Anita listens, hashtag Anita listens. Questions, if you want to ask questions at any time during the course of the program, the microphone over here, the stationary microphone, is where you can do that. Doug is there waving his hand, and he will help you get lined up to ask your questions. And if you want to make a comment, Shanae, there she is. Shanae has the wireless mic, and she will get the wireless mic to you. So wireless mic for comments, stationary mic for questions. So let's dive right into the Q&A now. Our first group of questions is focused on the timely topic of gun legislation. And we'll get things started with an audience advance question submitted by Clay, who lives in Scottsdale. What is doable on gun control in the near future? Now, in general, I'm not going to direct these questions. They're just going to go to the panel, and the panel can decide among themselves who wants to answer. But in this particular case, Geneva, you get the nod to take this one for the
Well, this gives me more time to talk about those two policies that I feel are doable. I know we have some barriers, but I am hopeful. My touchstones in this fight are our founder of Moms Demand Action, Shannon Watts, and also Senator Chris Murphy. And he's been working on this issue, and I've been following him, and he has hope that we could get this passed. We know that we need Senate Majority Leader McConnell to bring it to a vote. And I know that people feel that that's like a huge stumbling block and it will never happen, but we can't give up hope because the stakes are too high. That's why I'm asking you all to text and get 5 friends or family members to text, because the more pressure, the more we use our power and our voices, the better chance that we have. And I believe in that power. So I think those two policies are our best chance for something that's very doable in the near future.
So thanks, Geneva. Just to double check, we're supposed to text the word check?
Checks.
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 Okay, plural, to 64433.
That's right.
Okay, great.
So
Anybody else?
Yeah, so I want to add to that because I think that the idea of people getting down that this isn't possible, right? We've been sitting on H.R. 8 since February. The House passed it. But just in the last couple of days, because of the action, because of the pressure of Moms Demand and all the other gun advocates out there, at least we're seeing businesses respond, right? We're seeing Kroger respond and Walmart respond. We can't rely on businesses to solve this problem, but that shows you the power of the voice. That what is the issue is money in politics, is where these businesses see the consumer dollar value. Our representatives don't, because their consumer dollar value comes from the NRA. And so we need to make sure that they're hearing our voices, but also that we're speaking about the money in politics. And then I think background checks is the next in line. But I just want to applaud you and Moms Demand, and the Moms Demand that's actually in the back here.
Yes.
Because to see those open carry policies and to see those stores taking action is, I know, comforting for me, and it should be, for all American families. So.
Yeah, and I just have to say that I remember bringing my cut-up club card to Fry's, which is owned by Kroger, 5 years ago in 2014. It was probably like this time of the year. And, in a dramatic fashion, I will not shop here until you prohibit open carry. And, it took this long, and I didn't think it would happen, but then one day it happened, and it's been a constant. We've had, our hashtag groceries not guns that we've been amplifying, and we've been putting pressure on. So I think it works. I think you're exactly right. Thank you.
It looks like we have some questions lined up over there, so maybe we can take one or two of those right now. Are they all gun related? No. Okay. Any other comments from the panel here? Okay. So before we come back to those, go ahead.
In addition to the Moms Demand Action Table, I want to point out there is a March for Our Lives table. It's very important that we listen to the youth, evolve the issue as well. They're back there in the orange, and it's important that we listen to the youth voices involved with this issue as well, because we see that so many of these unfortunate shootings do occur at schools. I just graduated from Paradise Valley High School, which is right next door, in May, and I think it's unfathomable that any young person should have to go to a school and be afraid of somebody coming in and taking their life.
Okay, we'll take one of the questions right now from the mic over there.
Thank you. I'm Steve from Scottsdale, and my question's for Brian. Could you please tell us about the September 20th climate strike event in Phoenix?
Yes, so my group, the Arizona Youth Climate Strike, is organizing a Phoenix climate strike here in Phoenix as well in downtown. That'll be September 20th from 2 to 6 p.m. That will take place at the historic City Hall or Maricopa County Courthouse. That's at 2 p.m. And at 3, we'll be marching from the historic City Hall to the state capitol, where we'll be having a rally and hearing stories from community members, youth, people of color, and frontline communities that are disproportionately affected by the effects of the climate crisis as well. And there's also strikes actually taking place around the state. We're so glad we had our first strike back in March, and since then, it seems like all the environmental groups have been much better. We've all been working together as a more of a united front, and we're seeing there's going to be strikes in Tucson as well, which is hosted by our Tucson organizers of our group. Sierra Club Arizona is hosting a strike in Flagstaff. Northern Arizona Climate Change Alliance is hosting a strike in Prescott and Payson, and as well there will be a strike in Mesa, Tempe, and Fountain Hills. So all of these can be found online at strikewithus.org. And that will take you to an interactive map with more resources about the demands being made by the strikes across the United States, in addition to a map showing you all the strikes closest to you. So Phoenix youth are joining alongside all youth of every 50 state, as well as I said earlier, youth in Canada, India, essentially any country you can imagine, the UK, across Europe as well. And we've actually had the youth climate activist Greta Thunberg, who sailed over on a net zero sailing boat from Sweden, and she's actually here in New York working with our colleagues over in New York City. Our youth organizers is over there with Fridays for Future New York, and she'll actually be speaking at the United Nations Climate Summit, which is that weekend following the climate strike. So we really hope you guys can make it out to join us up here in Phoenix. And for more information specifically to Phoenix or to RSVP, you can also just show up without RSVPing. The link is tinyurl.com/PHX climate strike.
And we'll send a follow-up of all the different actions and events to anyone that signed up and registered for this event. So if you didn't get that, we'll send it out to you.
And thank you for that question.
We have a comment also.
Anita, Doug made some great points about Schweikert's voting record. Yes. I'm glad he did that, because I've been thinking about this to get this to you, is that anytime you're campaigning, you need to bring that up, because I'm going to stick my turkey neck out and say that the majority of the electorate has no idea how he votes. The Republicans vote along party lines. They don't think about it. They say, oh, he's a Republican, I'm a Republican, that's what I'm voting for. Make sure that everybody knows what his voting record is, and maybe they'll change, and maybe the light will go on, and you'll get their votes.
Thank you, Paul. I appreciate that. And that is the plan, is to definitely highlight those votes, particularly on the issues that we know affect the majority of families, the things that we're most concerned about. You'll see we have a lot of healthcare questions coming up that have been submitted, a lot of climate questions. Those votes are key to that conversation. So thank you. Yes, agreed.
Okay, we're going to take another question over here from the mic.
Yes, I'm Connie, and I'm from Scottsdale. My question is a senior issue. David Schweikert's record is voting to make drastic cuts to Social Security and Medicare. And as it is, we don't even get cost of living increase every year. And I would like to put you on the spot and ask you to pledge that you're not going to make cuts, and as a matter of fact, you'll tweak it and get more money in, fix it, and give us some more money.
Yeah. I pledge to do that.
Okay.
Yes, yes. You are correct. David Schweikert has spent much time talking about the insolvency of Social Security and how it is going bankrupt. And that is not actually the truth if you do the math, which he proclaims to do so often. So there is the issue with Social Security is that there is more going out than there's coming in, but it is self-funding. it does fund itself with what we put in from our paychecks. And so there is a, I think, $2.9 billion reserve currently, or trillion, excuse me, reserve. And that will at some point get to the point where we're not going to be able to give everybody the benefits at the same 100% ratio that they should get. But we can fix that now by raising the cap. And so I'm very much in support of raising the cap. Perhaps there's also a bill out there about adding a payroll tax. Now that payroll tax, I know tax sounds scary. Don't go run and try to convince a Republican about taxes. But it's 1% over the next 20 years. And so it's not going to be felt by people immediately or in a big way, but it will keep Social Security strong, make it stronger, and make it last into the future for future generations. So yes, that is a pledge I will make.
Okay, thank you, Nita. I'm going to bring it back around to the gun legislation issue again, because we have 3 audience poll questions that we want to pose right now. So grab those red and green cards and wave them accordingly. Okay. So the first one.
We actually have a comment really quick. Sorry, just on the gun control.
Sorry. Oh.
Yes.
Okay.
You know, you constantly hear that we're going to go through background checks, and that's wonderful, but, you know, most of the people that have been mass killings are mentally ill, but background checks are not pulling up those people. Okay, they're angry, not mentally ill, but there are mentally ill people that kill people. I mean, that's a fact. But with the HIPAA law, how is the government going to get information on people that are ill?
Okay, so just to correct, one of the things that you said that's not true is about mental illness. Actually, less than 5% of shootings are by people with mental illness. They're more likely to be a victim than to be a perpetrator. And the other, you're expressing some doubt about background checks and how effective they would be. And so the 3.5 million gun sales that would have passed if there weren't background checks, those people would have gotten guns. So the background check bill is to make sure that people that are like going in another lane. It's like if you were at the airport and you can go through TSA, or you can go through the lane that you don't have to go through a check. We want to close that lane down. So we want everyone to have a check. So what happens right now is there's a lot of online sales and through private sellers who do not have the provision of providing a background check. So that's how criminals, people that shouldn't have their hands on a gun are getting a hold of them. So it may not stop every single sale, but it's definitely will be, it works, and we have evidence because in the states where they do prohibit or they require background checks on every gun purchase, there are less rates of death and injury from gun violence. So it's very data-driven as well.
So just to address the HIPAA question, so with the opioid crisis, because it's declared a public health issue, there's databases where providers and folks can check, and it's a secure database. You have to have a login to get to it, but you can actually see if opioid prescriptions, like if a person's doctor shopping, you can actually see that in this database. And I almost see something similar, that maybe there's something that can be shared in some kind of database, right? That when you're going to do a gun law background check, so there are ways to work within the HIPAA constraints in order to get the information you need. So just an idea around that.
Okay, thank you. So I want to do my poll. So the first question is, and again, this is an audience poll. Do you believe Congress should pass universal background checks now? Oh, wow. Well, that's pretty consistent, right, with what other polls have showed, right, Geneva?
That's right. I believe it's 93% of people across the country are in favor of them.
Great, thank you. So we have another one.
Ask about turning in AR-15 military-type weapons. Kind
Wait. So, do we need a ban? Do we need a ban on assault weapons? Okay. Wow. I'd say that's unanimous. Oh, there's one over there he held up the wrong card. And last but not least, do you support a multi-step process for obtaining a firearm? So this would be like in California, for example, where there are a number of hoops that you have to jump through in order to obtain a firearm.
Yes, waiting periods, interviews, personal interviews. This is actually a multi-step plan that's actually part of March for Our Lives Peace Plan. So if you haven't read their peace plan, I'd recommend it.
Great.
But good to see. Thank you.
Seems like we have pretty strong consensus around gun legislation. And that's right. Absolutely. And good point. This is
The best way to protect the Second Amendment is to make it safer for everyone. So
That's right.
Thank you for saying that.
Okay, our next set of questions covers, we have to keep moving on because we've got a lot of ground to cover.
It's okay.
Okay.
I can't believe what I have to go through today as a 32-year veteran of law enforcement, retired police chief, and what I have to go through to get a gun. That's just absurd.
Okay. Thanks for your comment. So our next set of questions covers kind of some miscellaneous topics that we want to pick up. These are advanced questions that we received. The first one is, this is one of my favorites actually tonight. What is motivating the Republicans to restrict and deny women's rights? And how specifically can we counter their agenda? So who wants to jump on that one?
I'll start. So, first, I want to say, because I think this is important, because this is always about people, not politics, not party lines, that when we talk about Republicans, and I don't know the person asked the question if that's what they meant, but for me it's Republican leadership, right? You know, I don't think all Republicans have the same viewpoints, and we don't like to segment that way. But I can't get inside their minds, just as many of us have struggled to do that and figure out what it is. But my feeling is that, of course, it is some of it is appealing to a base that feels like this is any rights we give women is ruining the family structure. It's against their religious beliefs, perhaps. And so it's appealing to a base. But it's also about power. And the way I look at this is that women are, in many cases, driving a lot of change currently. And a lot of the change that we're driving, whether it be with gun safety, whether it be on the education front, these are all different models where they're getting a lot of money from a donor system. You'll hear me talk a lot tonight about the idea of money in politics because I think it drives so much of what we're seeing wrong with our country today. And so that, if that source of reason of why they are there, that source of income is gone because women are pushing to get there, and to have equal rights will get us further and we'll have a louder voice. I believe that's why they're scared. I believe that it is that power play more than anything else. They will say it is because of religious beliefs. They will say it is because of these values, and it's not family values. So what will I specifically do? I don't know if anyone else wants to comment. I think what we should all specifically do is to continue to raise our voices on every front. And so what that means is we need to ratify the ERA, so women have equal rights. We need to ensure we have paid paternity and maternity leave and paid sick leave, so women have a chance. Guarantee equal pay.
Yes.
And protect our rights. We see what's happening with Title X funds, what's happening with these gag rules, and we need to repeal the Hyde Amendment. We need to make sure that our government isn't telling us what to do with our bodies. And so keep fighting all those points. Anybody want to add to that? Anybody? Brian?
So I have another audience poll question that's related. I think I already know the answer. Do you support ratification of the Equal Rights Amendment? All right. Great. So I'm going to take another question from the stationary mic over here.
Hi, my name's Dwight. I'm from Scottsdale, and I think I need to, first of all, just thank Anita for running again. Brought a big smile to our faces, and I know it took some reflection on your part, so if you could just spend a minute or two and tell us what you think could be different in 2020 where we came up short in 2018.
For sure. So what I have been focused on a lot lately is, this is actually an interesting question, because I talk to one of my sons a lot, who's just started kindergarten. And he doesn't understand the concept of you have to get ready now because school starts at a certain time. And so I said to him the other day, I said, I don't control time. And that is the same feeling that we had in 2018 with this election. The primary is so late. We found out we were the nominee on August 31st. Mail ballots went out 6 weeks later, less than 6 weeks later. And so what you have when you're running against an incumbent in a red district and you are a first-time candidate who doesn't have name ID is you have not enough time. And what we were able to do with no media attention, very little funds, really just grassroots sheer power, was to close that gap 14 points. And so what will be different and how we'll not come up short this time is time. We have started the campaign against David Schweikert specifically, to Paul's point, speaking about the votes specifically. There is a lot of focus on his investigation, and yes, that is important, but we know where we have the data from last time. And I'm not saying data because Schweikert does but we actually have genuine data from last time, and we know where the votes we need. And I will tell you, it's that independent base. It's the underengaged Democratic voters in this district, and there are a lot of them that we need to focus on. So we're going out there and we're doing that work now. We're doing it early. So come 2020, January 2020, when the average voter's paying more attention, we can have that deep, deep conversation about Schweikert. And because this is a district I've been in for so long, we're just embedding ourselves more in community events, having more of these type of conversations, which bring out new people, and again, across party lines. I'm actually doing an event with Global Chamber, really to talk about what we stand for, not in the context of R and D. The most fascinating thing to me when I became the nominee was I was able to present who I truly was in the Democratic primary and my unique perspective on this. But when you become the nominee, suddenly it's R and D, and it feels like nothing else you say matters. So we need to do that work now. We need 16,000 more votes compared to last time. It is very, very doable if you look at the metrics and the numbers. So thank you for the question.
Let's take another question from the stationary mic.
Hi, my name is Arnie, and I live in Scottsdale. Before I ask my question, I'm smiling here. I'm so proud of having an opportunity to vote for Anita again. I have seldom heard, actually I just recently heard somebody as well prepared as you. I won't mention her name, but she's running for president. And it's just a pleasure to listen to you. My question is about guns. I know we completed that topic. I hope you allow me to say that this country had a gun control bill in the past. It was called the Brady Bill. It was passed bipartisanly because Brady was the press secretary of President Reagan, who was seriously injured in an attempted assassination of the president. That bill banned machine guns. Now, everything we are trying to do here is great and important, but the banning of weapons, taking away weapons of war, weapons that are designed for the battlefield, is the only solution to the gun crisis we have today. And my question is, do you think there is a possibility of, against the NRA, which seems to me to be very weakened, of getting that type of Brady bill passed again?
I don't think that is a possibility until we vote a lot of these representatives out. I agree with you, it needs to be done, it is a major part of my platform, but I don't know that, I think if we get universal background checks before 2021, that is the goal right now. That, red flag laws, if we can move toward maybe some type of multi-step process for gun acquisition, but to get that Brady bill, I think it's going to take us to really vote out anybody that's backed by the NRA. Because I think the majority of Americans will agree with that, not as high as universal background checks, but we can get them there with the constant conversation, the storytelling that all our amazing activists are doing. But we really do need to understand the power that the NRA has in this. And until we get representatives that aren't funded by them, I think it'll be hard. That's why this election's so important.
Okay, we have a comment.
So an idea I've had that I think you could maybe put the NRA on the defensive is get them to define what are the societal purposes for the different kinds of guns. I get that people use shotguns and rifles in hunting, they use handguns in self-defense, but I can't for the life of me think what role in society there is for an assault rifle with 100 rounds of ammo other than to let these people go out and kill a lot of innocent people. So I ought to push back on them and say, what is the societal purpose of that kind of gun that we should allow it? Because I think there isn't any.
Okay.
We have another comment.
All right.
I just read today that San Francisco passed a law labeling the NRA as a domestic terrorist organization. So bravo for California.
All right, I'm going to take another one of the advanced questions that we received. Changing gears here, what can you do to encourage the light rail to Paradise Valley Mall? All politics is local, right?
So this one is, I'm going to give you a quick snapshot of what it is. We had all agreed to pass props. So you know about the props that just happened, right? We all agreed. We passed that. We did an amazing. We refuted it. Excuse me. Did an amazing job. It's very important to our businesses, to our members of our disabled community, that we did this. This is infrastructure, and we have Prop 104 that we passed, which extended the time where that little bit of sales tax increase is happening. So we just need to pressure the city council to get this done before that expires. And so you need to go to your city council rep and your city councilman or woman and have that conversation. Depending on who's there, they might drag their feet. But what I would also suggest, and what I think is very powerful, is to talk to the businesses that this will impact in a positive way, that the businesses that want this. That business coalition power can get this done. So I don't know who asked Leslie. Is Leslie here with this question? Okay. So we'd be happy to talk more about that, but for anyone that's interested.
Something you could do is keep that funding level, get it back up to where it's supposed to be.
Yes, definitely keep the funding level there. But it's important to put the pressure on this because that sales tax increase, that money can go to any other transportation type projects if they don't use it on light rail, which doesn't mean we don't need that other money, but we can get more infrastructure money federally. And so we can partner and work together to make sure that the light rail is done, but then also our roads are fixed and our bus system is better and et cetera.
Okay, so we are going to be pressed for time here very quickly. We're running behind, so I'm going to make a few executive decisions along the way in terms of skipping through some of the questions that we had taken in advance. So I'm going to skip.
We had a lot of questions come in, and we didn't know how shy you guys would be. So this is good.
Yeah, so this is a great question, but I'm going to skip this one. What are we going to do to?
Thank you, Donald, if you're here. Thank you. I will talk to you about this one later.
I think the next subject that we want to talk about is health care. So I'm going to shift the ground there. We'll come back and pick up the questions over here, so not to worry. But we do need to introduce another kind of area of discussion, which is health care. As we know, those of us who are aging know all too well. I guess we're all aging, but some of us seems like we're aging faster than others. In any case, we know that health costs are rising, and this has become one of the major issues of our time. So we have several advanced questions on health care that are kind of closely related. Here's a couple, one from Camille in Scottsdale, the other from Steve in Scottsdale, having to do with Medicare and universal coverage. So are you for Medicare for all or universal coverage? And then Steve's question is, what is your opinion about universal health care coverage versus a public option?
So universal health care, that is a very lofty ideal, a very lofty value that we all share. We want everybody to have coverage. But what is coverage? What does that mean? Does it reduce your costs necessarily? Does it mean you're fully covered? We have a lot of people in this country that are underinsured. Does it make a difference to the 1/3 of American families that are struggling with debt because of medical costs? No. So to answer that question simply, in the interest of time, I am for Medicare for all. Because a Medicare for all type system, and I say type, because people always want to poke a hole why I say that. I say type because there are several plans being discussed politically right now. But the only way to bring the costs down is to take the ACA, which is amazing, and I am on the ACA, so I'm allowed to speak about this. I know what I'm talking about, and I can have that conversation out the doors. The only way to bring those costs down is to build upon it and to have leverage. When you have a single payer model, you have leverage to set those rates. You have leverage to have the conversation. The idea of competition in the marketplace, and I'm a business person and Doug will agree, we love competition. I'm not against capitalism, but there's ideas in our country that we should just protect people, and healthcare is one of them. And so the idea of, we talk too much about competition in the insurance market. Insurance companies are middlemen. Let's have competition with our providers. And so I'll let you think and chew on that a little bit, and we'll move on.
Okay.
Unless, actually, you want to know? Okay. She completely agrees.
Well, let's take another question over here.
Okay. My name is Mark, and I'm from Scottsdale, and my question is a two-part with Social Security. First of all, there is a cap right now on Social Security where millionaires only pay for 6 months. So this is the first part of my question. Are you for taking that cap off?
Yes, I'm not for completely. Did you ask the question about raising the cap or removing it completely? Raising the wage base? So we have that question coming. Yes. So I need to look further into removing the cap completely and to make sure that the inputs and the outputs of Social Security would make sense. But I am in favor of raising the current cap and then also including another cap for over $400,000 because that revenue will preserve Social Security.
And my second part is if you're retired, you're paying tax on your Social Security. Are you for taking that tax off of Social Security for, let's say, a family making $75,000 or less?
I am in favor of it if it's progressive like that, yes, and to look at that. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Next, we have a couple more questions on that are related to healthcare, and they're in particular about the ways to reduce the cost of medical services and prescription drugs. So, the first question from Dave in Phoenix: Medicare has formula for physician fees, hospital costs, and lab fees. Why not for drugs? And a related question from Mike in Phoenix is, what is being done to reduce the cost of prescription drugs?
Yeah, so, okay, it is on. So talking about money in politics. When Medicare was originally put in place, and the Medicare Part D, which particularly covers prescriptions, there was something that was written into that legislation from a big pharma company and other folks that put money in that said that Medicare cannot negotiate for prescription drug prices. So Medicare is the #1 purchaser of prescription drugs, and they can't negotiate prices. So one thing that is in one of the bills that has been proposed is for Medicare to actually be able to negotiate prices on prescription drugs, which is huge, because if they can negotiate prices, then every single commercial payer, Aetna, Cigna, all these guys, you know, they're going to have that lower price that they're going to have to compete against. So that's one thing. Second thing is rebates. I don't know if you guys know how rebates work and the prescription, these middlemen work, but essentially pharmaceutical manufacturers pay to get on insurers' formularies. And the insurers say we're doing this because we think it's better for the patient and all of that, but honestly it's because they're getting a rebate back. Now, some insurance companies have committed to give that back to the patient. Whether or not you're actually seeing that is in question, but Medicare is also negotiating that in order to pass rebates through. So those are a couple things that are really going to help. But honestly, like anything that you want to do, if you're tracking this transparency, it's all about transparency. There's so many people that don't understand prescription pricing and the fact that Medicare can't even negotiate, that if you hear the word transparency, pay attention, because that's really where we're going to start seeing some traction.
I see a comment. I see, yeah, yes. I just don't know where the mic is for you, sorry.
Just a real quick, I don't know if it's a comment or a question, but it's frustrating to me because why can't we figure this out? We don't even have to recreate the wheel. And transparency is great, but I don't want to see why they're screwing me. I want them to stop screwing me.
We have another comment as well.
I'm Mike from Scottsdale. One caution, Medicare is a formula for physicians. I don't know how many people know that that formula is written by the AMA. So watch out for that same trap that a pharma, the organization pharma, isn't doing the same thing for drugs.
There's a lot of money across the board with healthcare, with all these issues, lobbying money, donations. That is when you're saying, why can't we just figure it out? That's a big reason.
Am I on? Okay. Well, I'm with you because I got screwed last night by my insurance company, United Health. From what I understand, all the big insurance companies and corporations across the United States have already received a 20% pay cut from 45. Last night, I got a 25% increase in my insurance premiums, which means United Healthcare is now making 45% profit from us.
Jeez.
I know you're good at math. Did I do the math right?
My name is Bill from Paris Valley. I have a lot of experience in procurement under federal acquisition regulations. What I don't understand is, in my mind, the prohibition on negotiating prices for Medicare would be a complete contradiction to federal acquisition regulations. And I don't know if anybody's ever tested which takes precedence, but every other federal agency in the country has to follow the federal acquisition regulations in their procurement processes, at least as far as I know. So I wonder if it's ever been attacked from that angle. Federal acquisition regulations require competition and documentation of that competition and documentation of why you haven't had the competition if you don't. So that's my comment.
Yeah, and I think that's where the money comes in, right? Because somehow when this originally passed, and no one's actually looked at it, so that's a great comment, and that may be what they're looking at now, but it's actually bipartisan support in order to get that restriction removed on Medicare negotiating for prescription prices. So we're hoping to see that passed this legislative session.
We have another comment.
Hi, I'll make this quick. So I visit Canada often, particularly Quebec, and they were having a problem with their prescription prices. And to counter that, they threatened the pharmaceutical companies with tendering laws. And so according to the Montreal Gazette, that immediately, across the board, brought down prices. So just wanted to share that.
I just wanted to get on the opportunity right here where we're talking about healthcare problems and also how everything's all related with gun control and climate, to call attention to the outlaw dirty money table. That is the heart of everything. I am alarmed about climate change. I am alarmed about gun violence. I am alarmed about healthcare. And the root of all of this are the corporations that are considered as people and able to contribute. And until we can able to overturn Citizens United at the federal level, we have to we have to disclose the dirty money, because a corporation like Walmart or Kroger's could be having good PR, but how they're donating could be different. And that could be completely for their shareholders. So make sure you sign Outlaw Dirty Money and vote for Anita.
This is on the drug issue. I'd like to throw up a snap poll and see if anyone else besides me is tired of watching drug ads on TV and learning about what drugs I should ask my doctor about. Is there any way to get this off the airwaves?
That's a good question. I'll look into that one. I don't know. I think anything is possible if we all feel the same way, right? It's pushing for it. We can there's marketing restrictions, so there's possibility.
Okay,
we have another comment, actually.
One moment. A quick audience poll, another quick audience poll. Do you support a Medicare for All type plan? Type plan, right. Okay. We had a few opposed, but by and large, everybody seemed to support that. Okay.
We have
comment.
Yes.
This is an extra thing just added relevant. I used to work for the FDA. I'm a physician, and there's documentation that those ads increase the demand for those expensive, brand new drugs still making money. So get them off. But what I was going to say is, so I spend a lot of time on Facebook trouncing and beating up conservative trolls. And a lot of this is about guns. And one of the things I think the Democratic leadership really needs to do a much, much better job is PR. Because over and over and over again, and I'm a scientist also by origin. I know data as well, real data, not alternative data. And the NRA puts out absolute garbage. And if you ask the average citizen, do guns make you safer? They'll say, oh yeah. And I have to come back, well, did you know 2 to 10 times more likely to die if you own a gun than if you don't? Protection is not, et cetera, et cetera. We really need people to stand up in leadership and create their own messaging, not always refute what the NRA says, because it's to the point of insanity. And I'm happy to see what San Francisco did, because they do support terrorists right now. I would just request that there be a democratic message for the kinds of things you mentioned, which are, all of you, outstanding. I'm 62, and I've never seen a political situation like this, and you give me hope.
Okay, let's take a question over here from the mic.
Hi, my name's Clint. I live here in North Central Phoenix. I didn't mean to necessarily go outside of the topic we were talking about right now, but we shifted into healthcare after I'd gotten in line. My specific question related both to the environment and the economy, because as much as I, obviously want people to, I don't want California to be on fire all the time, and I want water in our reservoirs that feed in here to the States. For me, outside of just the basic needs to survive, I've always been confused why the environmental debate isn't just simply an economic one. that why we as the United States don't want to be the leader in those technologies. You know, with the, you know, here in the state of Arizona, we have some wonderful universities that have amazing science programs. With your background as an executive in the technology field, I'm curious what we can do as a state and as a representative to really build and say, we want to build those technologies not only to power our state economy, but to better our environment and to export those around the world. We want to be that leader. We want to be the one that other countries turn to buy that technology that's going to power their countries. And to me, that's what I've always looked at as more of the environmental sell outside, or excuse me, the economic sell is just as important as, you know, you need to live. So I'm just curious what you think we can do as a representative.
That was very well put. Thank you. You know, what's interesting to me, and Brian won't like hearing this, but last cycle, a lot of times I'd have some people come to me and say, when do you think we can get people to care about the environment? And it was because we are plagued with so many issues that are economic. And so it was when you draw the line between the environment and the economics, that's when you're going to maybe start to wake some people up, particularly people that are not at the forefront like Brian. What can we do? I'm going to sound like a broken record, but a lot of it is getting the money out of the system because we are supporting the fossil fuel industry because they are supporting our leaders, our leadership in DC currently. So one of my first measures would be to take all the subsidies we give to fossil fuel companies and put them all in renewable energy. That's $15 billion, I believe, a year at least, at a minimum. So, but again, how do you get there? How do you make that move? It's going to be tough until, again, we have more people that understand that the impact is real, climate change is real, the crisis is real, and we continue to draw that story. So locally at this level and in this conversation and in this race, it is making that economic connection. You know, the cost of the climate crisis is extremely high on our economy. The inputs that we put in, the investment we make into renewable energies, the investment we make into clean air and clean water and to providing education, that actually pays for itself as we go down the line. But what we've seen with everything this administration has done, rolling back regulations, is everything's short-sighted. Everything's for a quick earn or a quick profit raise right now. There's no looking toward the future. That applies to climate change, that applies to healthcare, that applies to education. And so, again, there's a lot we can do. It'll take a while, but I want to also see what Brian has to say on this.
Thank you so much for that. I completely and entirely agree. I'm so happy to hear all of that as well. And for those of you that don't know, part of what the work we do in our group is to get some of our elected officials and candidates to pledge to keep this dirty money out of our politics as well, because that is what it comes back to. A lot of it is the money. Anita actually took the no fossil fuel money pledge, which ensures that she will not be taking any contributions over $250 from PACs executives or people operating in the fossil fuel industry, and instead, prioritizing the health of her constituents. And this includes standing up to, entities like APS that, Arizona has, I believe, the second highest capacity in the nation for solar and renewable energy, and we have no major sources of natural gases or fossil fuels, yet we continue to import these things from other states and, ignore the opportunity present to boost our own economy. A lot of what's happening at the state legislature I know of is that they're talking and preparing a rainy day fund because they know we're heading for, an economic cliff. And what's happening here is that rather than making these investments to our future and rather than having our elected officials and our politicians stand up to these industries and, mandating that we need to have more investments in renewable energies and a clean energy grid and infrastructure, allowing for all of that, is that they're instead choosing to allow these entities like utility industries and fossil fuel industries to continue controlling the narrative here and continue making these short-sighted investments into continuing the importing of fossil fuel and use of fossil fuels and natural gas for electricity generation over the better option, which is renewables.
Okay, thank you. I have another quick poll, and we're going to jump ahead to it. Do you support automatic voter registration? Yes. No. Why? No. It would. No, I think what we're talking about, and when we talk about automatic voter registration, And I
Is
don't want to
when-
preempt.
There's
Anita,
different
go ahead.
proposals. One is when someone turns 18. One is from the time you get a social security card, you're already in the roll so that when you turn 18, it's already there. But yeah, I mean, it wouldn't necessarily say dictate where you have to vote,
Right.
but it would say you are registered in wherever you choose as your place of residency.
So hold up that green card. There you go. All right. Let's see. There were several questions, actually a number of questions specifically for Anita. But again, in the interest of time, because
We can do it either way. Yeah, I was going to say we could do green if you want me to answer them really quick. If not, we'll move on to climate change. We have a lot of climate change questions. So.
yeah, that's why I wanted to make sure we got some climate change issues in here. So I can tell you one that's really important. I know everybody would agree they would like to have an update on the House Ethics Committee investigation into David Schweikert. Can you bring us up to date?
There's not a lot of new information. So in July, they released that 424-page report. I don't know how many of you saw it, but it really gave an insight into the questioning that was done with David Schweikert's staff. We also know that he did not cooperate with that. So the subcommittee, there's a subcommittee that's running this, did recommend subpoenas. We haven't heard more about those and whether or not anything is coming of it. But we did know today. Today marks the 1 year since the second referral. And what a referral is they say that there's some new information in this case and we're submitting it to this subcommittee for review. That's been 1 year from today. So today they actually released the document that was filed a year ago, and it has the 5 different points that they are looking into. There are many accusations against him. Some of them are ethics, some of them could be possibly legal issues, should they come out to be true. So we actually have printouts of that, so just because we knew this was coming up today, and it happened today, so we've printed it out for you, and I don't know who on the team has it or where you can get it, but they are here somewhere. And no, it's not that.
That's not that.
But yeah, Chantel in the back there in the pink has them on your way out if you'd like a copy. It's just a page and a half. It's not the 424-page report. That one I'll let you find on your own. We'll save paper, save the environment. But take a look at that. But that's all we know right now. We don't know when anything more will come out in terms of their decision. As most of you know, he's holding on and saying it's a bookkeeping error. Read this. It is hardly a bookkeeping error.
Okay. Comment.
Regarding the investigation, there's more paperwork that just came out within the last half hour.
Yes, so I think the Republic probably picked up the story. We did see it reported earlier, and that is the paperwork that we have. It is again, it's a copy of the referral that was submitted last year about why this investigation is still ongoing. Thank you.
We have another comment as well.
Okay.
I just have a question. This doesn't seem to be covered that much on the news. I don't feel like a lot of Republicans have a lot of information on this. I was wondering, just as you run, if not much information is given out on this, is it possible that you guys might run ads on this to let people know? I feel like you would be remiss not to, because they need to know.
Yes, we will. And when we ran this campaign last time, so this referral came out September 5th. None of us knew about it. They didn't release the information until December, after the election. Convenient. And so we did have the initial part of his investigation. There's been 2. And that part we did promote. It was on every piece of lit. We did run ads. We did a lot of social media ads. And we did a lot of radio ads. So we'll continue to do that. And now we have more to go on. But we are very cognizant as well. And I think someone made the point earlier about, I think it was gun safety actually, about going forward with a vision rather than always countering. And that is something that I am very keen to do with this cycle, because we learned last cycle what works and what doesn't work, particularly with the voters we need to flip or engage that don't vote. And bringing negative news to them is not always going to do it. It is the vision, it is the plan, it is how you will make my life better. And so we will do both, but in a very measured approach.
Okay, I have another question from the audience, an advanced question for Anita. Why are you more electable than Tipperary?
Can we see who asked that? Are they here? So I get this question a lot, and I want to make first a comment. There are 3 women in this race, and it's very important to me that we acknowledge that. This is democracy. There is not just 2 women. It is not just myself and Harold Tipperary. But I think of the 3 of the field, I feel I'm more electable for 3 reasons. One is I have the momentum. I've been running against David Schweikert for a while now. We built this infrastructure. This infrastructure did not exist in CD-06 before. We've never seen an election like we did before. But I also have the experience. Both of my opponents in the primary race have incredible experience. But my experience is something that we know works within this district, and it's a conversation about our security. Whether it's technology security, whether it's safety for our families and our kids, I am embedded in this district, and we're able to have a conversation that's a little bit more unique than I believe that the others can. I believe that we have very strong, progressive, bold ideas. We talked about Medicare for all. My opponents don't support Medicare for all in this race. To me, that's a very, very important difference. And again, I have the experience, for people that are naysayers of Medicare for all, think that we can't get Republicans to that. You have to understand that if you can talk to somebody about their family and talk to someone because you have that personal experience, it is very powerful. And we actually just recently did a poll, which we'll be releasing next week, so you're the first to hear it, that of Democrats and independents in this district, Medicare for all is polling extremely, extremely well. It does have the support, and we're seeing that nationally as well. So my experience both with the healthcare system, my experience with technology, my experience going up against David Schweikert, I believe makes me the best candidate. And lastly, we have the data. And in all due respect to Stephanie, I'll address the Harold Tipperary specific question now. There's a perception about what makes a candidate electable and what makes a candidate strong. And that perception and what this race has become about is money. And I'm going to tell you something that I don't like to have this conversation, but it's the truth, and so I don't feel bad about it. The truth is that we look at the data, and I am big on math and I'm big on numbers. Thank you, Carrie, for saying that. Is that there's a notion that this is somebody that did extremely well, and she did, and I have great respect for Dr. Tipperary. But if you look at the general election in November, with 10 times less money, with no national attention, with a host of issues in our family, I actually outperformed what she did in CD8. And so I am frustrated with the notion that this is about somebody that's more elected. I respect democracy, I respect the primary, but when I am asked that question, that is my answer, because I firmly believe that this district understands what's at stake. And I know that because I've done the work, and I know that because I grew up here, and I know that because we came together and we did something incredible in 2018, and that was hope. And now we're ready to take the hope and get him out of there. So, thank you for the question.
Okay. We have another comment from the audience.
Remember, if you're posting or tweeting tonight, that's hashtag Anita Listens. Okay, comment.
My question, I'm going to keep it general and simple. The Veterans Administration, the need for oversight and transparency there is getting beyond the pale. I don't know how many people heard about it, but just this last week, 2 deaths in West Virginia in the Veterans Administration upon exhuming the bodies proved to be not natural causes, but homicide. And there's 9 more in West Virginia being investigated. Our VA is not much better. I'm a 100% disabled veteran, and they know me as a fighter. They're afraid of me. But we have had some veterans that have died in most suspicious circumstances here. And there's a guy that did 32 years and was a police chief. It's more than suspicious to me. The VA needs some major insight and transparency throughout.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I agree. We definitely, I mean, I support our veterans, and we need to look at what is happening with the VA and resources for our veterans. So thank you for sharing that.
Okay, and take another question over here.
Hi, I'm Lara Jean Williams. I'm from Scottsdale. And I want to kind of be a voice for some people that don't get talked about a lot, at least in big common circles. So I'm the parent of a child with special needs. And I have a couple of questions, or at least asking how you will help them or keep that voice to everyone. You know, we work with our children to help them to become independent. And my son just turned 20. And I belong to a lot of groups of special needs students and parents and caregivers. And all of them echo the same thing. And that is, what is going to happen to our children when we're gone? You know, he benefits from Social Security. And there are other benefits like housing. But housing is a wait list of 8 to 10 years, I'm told, sometimes. He gets about $700 a month. With the increase in rent and cost of living and his inability to earn an income that would be to afford his life, with the increases in indiscretions in care homes and the lack of oversight in care homes, it leaves a lot of us terrified. I mean, not just a little bit terrified, but we go to bed every night terrified. And so I want to know what people will do or how they can help support sort of the voiceless. Because, you know, their moms and dads are home with them. So we don't always get to get out, and there are certainly, I get to get out. In fact, my son gets to get out, and he would be here tonight. But there are a lot that cannot get out with either medically fragile or just children that, for them, it's not a venue that they can come to. And their parents stay home with them as caregivers. So I want to know what you could do to help that. That's one question. Can I ask one more? So the other question that I have is that this is a bit of a little political controversy, okay? So my son also, I was a Montessori teacher, and I took my son out of public school because it was a downward horrible spiral. And I took on the ESA. I'm a Democrat. And I just need people to understand that it saved our lives. My son was going, you know, they had recommended him pushing wheelchairs. That was his, and he just recently opened his own business. So I did that because I had funding through the ESA. It started out on the backs of special needs children, you know, the voucher program, right? I disagree with the nature of it. And I'm utterly grateful to have had it for my son this entire time. So I'm asking people to understand that not everything is black and white for everyone. And I know lots and lots of special needs families who this saved them. So when you want to dispose of the ESA, because we want to support our public schools, I do too. But for special needs children, our public schools are not always very helpful. In fact, sometimes they're harmful. And so I'm asking you to look at the gray areas. Before you toss out the program, at least consider those children who are benefiting. And for those of us who gave up our jobs when we didn't have money, I'm a single mom. I'm homeschooling my son. So for those of us who are caregivers, give up our jobs to do the right thing that we think we can do, please remember us.
Thank you for that, and thank you for saying gray area, because most issues have many gray areas, and we tend to speak, particularly in the political realm, as everything is black and white, just like R&D. I will start with your second question, and we'll see if we have time, and maybe you and I could speak after about what we can do to bring those voices to the table. But I believe in school choice. I mean, every parent should have their choice. What I don't believe in is taking the funds that were meant for our public schools to go to that and to expand the program. And so the voucher program has its place. We all know that. And I think most people that are fighting for education in this state feel that way, that it has its place for students like your son. But what we need to do is make sure it's controlled and that place stays there. And then again, the funds that were meant for our public schools are not depleted because we're trying to increase the ESAs and voucher system. So that's not lost on me. And bringing the voices to the table, it's a commitment I will make for every underserved group in our community. It is something that's very important to me. I see Debbie behind you. It's talking to the tribal councils that feel like no one comes and asks them a question until it's time to vote. It's about talking to, we have members, we meet with Ability 360, we talk to our disabled community, and so I will continue to do that as a part of when I am elected as your Congresswoman. It'll be a part of my quarterly meeting cycle to bring those voices to the table so that if they can't get out, we have a representative so that we can understand what we can do federally, whether it be by grants, whether it be other type of assistance. So I'd love to talk to you more, though. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on at this point to take a few questions or address a few questions pertaining to climate change. We've already touched on the subject, but the climate crisis obviously has been very much at the forefront in so many different ways lately. And I think it's appropriate that we kind of take a few minutes at least before we have to wrap up to address some of those issues. And the first one that we have is an advanced question that we received. The climate crisis is affecting us right here in Maricopa County. This is from Jason in Phoenix. And he goes into some detail with examples, but I think the gist of the question is, how do we provide a federal solution? Even though these are local issues, they manifest themselves, the climate crisis manifests itself in very local ways here locally and throughout the country, but how do we deal with it at the federal level?
So I think we talked a little bit about some of these ideas before, but again, removing subsidies is the key. Taxing emissions, corporate emissions, needs to happen. That brings the revenue also into this picture as an economic issue. We need to really focus in on our underserved communities and understand what is happening across the board with our low-income communities and make sure that we're investing with federal grants for renewable energies in those communities, for utility assistance in those communities. So there's a host of issues that are both economic, both related to actually cleaning the air and cleaning the water, but starting with the fossil fuel industry, to me, is the first place we start. Because if we can take that money, people always say, how are you going to pay for that? How are you going to pay for that? Well, a lot of the solutions that we have are just about moving money from something that isn't working into something that is. We continue to want to fund things that are harmful to Americans, and instead of moving that money to something that will solve our problems. And that's what I would start with.
That was a great response as well. And on the national level, we're seeing federally that the Environmental Protection Agency and many of the rules and regulations that have been passed by past administrations are under attack by a lot of conservative lawmakers and the Trump administration and their lackeys, essentially. And something that's not often mentioned is the tool through which many conservative lawmakers in Congress are using to repeal these rules and roll them back, which is the Congressional Review Act of 1996. And it's very important that past public figures in the Democratic leadership have attempted to repeal this, namely Senator Cory Booker, who's running for president right now as well. But we need to have more attempts in these and more discussions about how a tool that was initially meant to help enforce checks and balances and protect, how the bill works and the act works is that within 60 days of a rule being put into effect, lawmakers are able to review it as well and choose to roll it back or invalidate the rule as necessary and prevent similar rules rules that are similar in large capacities to be proposed again. And that is how a lot of our environmental regulations and rules that are passed by the EPA in conjunction with Congress are being rolled back from the Obama-era administration as well. So I think we do need to have more of a discussion on how we can repeal the Congressional Review Act and enact something that has less of a flaw, because right now conservative lawmakers are using a flaw that rules that were not officially and formally put up for review before 1996 can be revisited and officially put up for review by current lawmakers and then repealed and invalidated in that manner. So we need to be having more discussions about how on the federal level looks to ensure that a lot of these amazing and progressive environmental rules and regulations are not going to be rolled back as soon as new lawmakers are elected into office.
Thank you. We'll take another question over here.
Ja, she sandra kininchle, tselna building bashes chin, setna jenny dash a chay, trabahan dashanale, she lay twat I yesterday nasha, when the Salt River Indian Community Shagan. Good evening, everybody. I am a citizen of the Navajo Nation, and I live in the Salt River Pima Maricopa Indian Community. And I am concerned, I think, really about our state. Not, our congressional district is really important to me, but the last time that the state really did anything about education for tribes, it's been a long time. When I think about the education programs that are for tribes, I think about the Johnson O'Malley program, which is a federal program. And I think the last time a rate was adjusted was back in the 90s. And tribal students the value of a student for the school year was like $56. And that was the last time it was adjusted. And when I look around our state here in Arizona, it's really been disappointing, disheartening to see our state leaders not understand the need for supports within the Office of Indian Education, which is a part of Arizona Department of Education. And time again, legislation hasn't been passed here locally. And I think there's a perception that tribes have money just coming out of everywhere to fund them. That's absolutely not true. Our tribes are dealing, compared to CD-06, they live in like third world countries, although it's poverty is defined differently, maybe we don't see dirt floor as being impoverished, that we see riches in our clan systems and our families. But when it comes to education, it is very difficult for tribes to compete against our world today, our Western society, without education. We cannot do that. Tell me how you are going to be a different kind of leader. How are you going to stand up for tribes, especially in Arizona where we have 21 tribes, and we also have many tribes that are represented here in LD26, which is Tempe, Mesa, and Phoenix area. We have 563 tribes across the country, and I can guarantee you that at least one family member or a family from every one of those tribes lives in our district. It may not be Honda, and it may not be CD-06, but it is in my district, and I'm very concerned about that. I want to know how you are going to be different. What are you going to do? How are you going to advocate and work together with other leaders to ensure that Arizona tribes get this rate increase that they are long overdue for? And how will you ensure that we do more? Because our kids are deserving of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. Thank you. I have hope at the state level for our new superintendent of instruction, Kathy Hoffman, who is looking at these issues. What I personally will do at the federal level to ensure funding, to ensure we have the transparency, to ensure I'm speaking up for the district, all the tribes in Arizona, but the two that also fall in this district, is to have that conversation. So is to meet with the tribal council, is to meet with the people, and again, as a part of a quarterly review with all of our underserved areas, including our tribes, is to say what is happening, what are your current needs, what do we need to look at, whether it be water, which I know is a concern with many of our tribes, whether it be education, to have that conversation on a regular committed basis. That is the first commitment I can make to you. But working through with our state leaders as well. And again, I hope we're very hopeful that what we can, we can increase the Democratic majority in the House and the Senate locally here to make some of these changes, but also working with Superintendent Hoffman. Thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry, but we're going to have to wrap this up. We're not going to be able to get to other questions, unfortunately, given the time. We have to be out of here by 8:45, so we want to make sure that people have some time to interact with the folks at the tables who've come here. So we're going to wrap this up by kind of going back where we started and let each of the panelists make a kind of a closing statement. But I would like to, in so doing, I'm going to skip over here to one of the last questions that we got, and this is from Nancy in Scottsdale. So it's actually to Anita, but we're going to ask each of you try to incorporate a little bit of this response into your own closing statement, which, by the way, you're going to have to keep brief. So the question is, what will Anita do and the rest of us do to foster unity among all Americans in order to solve the problems we face? So, Pooja.
All right, so I think the biggest thing is we're here. She's listening today, and I think that makes a big difference. And I think there has been a big divide in our country, but I see folks like Anita that are trying to at least bring people to the table and listen, and I think that is the first step. But I'm going to, just for my closing statement, go back to what I started with is, you know, your voices matter, and we saw that with the ACA. And we saw that with the repeal of the ACA, and texting and reaching out to your Congress, well, not our Congress, but reaching out to, you know, your representatives and making your voices heard is going to make a huge difference in all of this. And I think that's a really important, and we heard it also from the, you know, from the moms and the guns. You know, it takes time, and healthcare, it is complicated, despite what our president thinks. It is a very complicated topic, and we're not going to solve it. I've been doing this for 25 years, and there's things that come back around, but we're still going at it, and there's things that we're finally starting to open up. So don't give up the hope. Attend these things, make your voices heard, and it's going to make a huge difference. That I can guarantee.
So I started out as an environmentalist in college, and I became a chemical engineer and worked for the DuPont company. So when we talk about unity, you know, I've been on both sides of that. And so I guess, you know, to have a united sensibility, you've got to recognize that there are certain things that may seem evil, like business. I think there's a lot of people in our party that think business is bad. You know, as the head of a chamber of commerce, I don't believe that. I also don't believe DuPont is bad. I worked there, and I know there were a lot of really good people there. So unity requires us to be understanding and patient, and recognize that there's a lot of people doing a lot of really good things. And the good news is, it seems like America, between all of the lines, is united. You know, we don't want Russia running our elections, right? We don't, you know, we want a clean environment. I grew up in New York where the river was dead. You know, there was no fish in it, the Susquehanna River in upstate New York where I grew up. We don't want to go back to that. And so some of these things that are happening now are going to allow us to reverberate back to doing the right thing environmentally. But the bottom line from a business perspective, and I'll close with the business side of it, business is good. We want to make money, but we want to make it sustainably. And the things around sustainable energy, you know, the businesses in the United States and here in Arizona and in AZ06, they're doing the right thing around sustainability. The problem is the government isn't supporting them. APS isn't supporting them. And so what we need are leaders like Anita that shift some of the focus and some of the energy to help support them to do the right thing, because they are doing the right thing to build sustainable products in other countries. It'd be nice if they were building sustainable products here for Arizona as well. So.
And just to piggyback quickly on what Doug said, we talked kind of briefly over email about this. We didn't get to bring it up today, but our businesses, the voice of our businesses in CD6 is so important, even in the healthcare conversation. You think of, in my family, we've been entrepreneurs, and that's why we're on the ACA. It's saved so many people. It's driven innovation because people don't feel like they're attached to a job because of insurance. But then Medicare for all, but then the ACA also is who's paying for that, right? Our businesses. And so that's the shift to Medicare for all. So engaging them in that conversation, because this is important not only as a healthcare consumer, it's important to our businesses. This is a solution for everyone. So I just wanted to add to that. But thank you. Thank you both for being here. I'm going to pass it to him and then have my final thoughts, because I'm going to be a broken record again.
So I agree. When it comes to the question of unity, it's about reaching across the aisle and reaching out to these communities around us that are normally disenfranchised and not necessarily as heard as others, people with more privilege as well. When it comes to the topic of climate, I think there's a difference between just climate action and climate justice. And climate justice involves having a full table with people that are disproportionately affected by the climate crisis. Our Latino communities, our indigenous communities, people of color across the nation, and especially in Arizona here as well. We need to be having more leadership like Anita that are willing to reach across and uplift voices and hear them and have these difficult conversations that we need to be having as well. But aside from just Congress and the federal level, I really implore all of you to look more into your local races as well for the state legislature. There's so many amazing pieces of environmental legislation that were killed off by conservative lawmakers, did not even make it into committee this past session from January to May. For those of you that aren't familiar with Debbie, who would just ask the question, she's running for House and LD 26. Support these races, support people that are going to make real change in our state, as well as our other candidates back there. We have Judy Schweiber, Doug Irvin from LD 20, Julie Gunnagle from who's running for county attorney, Shay Stanfield, who's running for Corporation Commission, Bill Mundell, who isn't here, but I know he's running as well, Eric Herlin, and all these amazing candidates that are running at the local level to help make change that will, make these amazing investments in our future and the future of our youth and our families and our children as well.
So I think what we can do to unify the country is exactly what Anita is doing, which is listening. And so I think that's a wonderful example when you're talking to somebody that maybe you disagree with, is just to listen first and maybe find your common ground. Listen with like a deeper understanding of like what's the deeper fear or concern. And I know when it comes to gun violence prevention, I've talked to many people who disagree with me, and what I like to do is just get to like, well, you're afraid for your family's safety, and I have that fear too, and then I can segue, and I know this fact, and so it just gives like a common ground to have that conversation on. So I think listening is number one, and I think that I want to thank Anita for having this town hall and for allowing me to sit up here and talk to you about gun violence prevention and making this an issue that is front and center for her campaign. So thank you very much.
Thank you all for being here. I have 2 points I wanted to close on. I know we're running past time, so please forgive us all, and thank you for your patience and for sitting through this. One of the biggest issues, again, of why I think we bicker so much and why we are so divided in this country and not making any progress is because we've allowed politics to become a game of money. We've allowed this to consume us. We've allowed our candidates and our representatives to campaign for years upon years at a time. They are not doing their job. They are campaigning. They are fundraising. And so I have made this a central commitment of my campaign because I didn't come into this to be a career politician. I came into this because I saw problems. And the biggest problem for me, and something that I cannot shake, is that we need to move to publicly funded elections. We need to protect our votes. And we need to say that your dollar does not matter, your vote matters. I will leave you with a stat that I believe is staggering, and I think you will too, that of all the money in the 2018 elections, only 0.5% of Americans, 0.5%, were the ones that gave the money over $200. All the donations that were of amounts over $200 came from 0.5% of Americans. Those are the people controlling our election system. And that is why we have this constant divide, because we are all scrambling to get our voice heard, but nobody is hearing us. Every troll that we deal with on social media just wants to be heard in their own special way. Right? Because they feel like they have an issue that nobody's hearing. And it's on both sides. And so I agree, listening is an important step. But also telling your story. Stories change the world. We see it constantly. We see it with what Youth Climate Strike is doing. We see it with March for Our Lives is doing it. We saw it with the Me Too movement. We see that constantly. So share your story. Go out and talk to somebody that might have differing views and just share your story, whether it be about healthcare, whether it be about gun safety. You will find common ground. That is what this campaign is about. That is why I'm so grateful you are all here. And thank you again for coming.
Okay, I have just a couple closing points here.
Visit the tables.
First of all, let's give our panelists another round of applause for a great event. And as Anita just mentioned, please, before you leave, visit the tables. We want to thank the candidates and organizations who are here tonight. Julie Gunnigal, Eric Kurland, I think Seth Blattman's organization is here, Doug Irvin, Judy Schweibert, Jennifer Samuels, the Outlaw Dirty Money folks, Moms Demand Action, Arizona Youth Climate Strike, and March for Our Lives. And if I left anybody out, I apologize. But stop by before you leave. We've got, a half an hour, 45 minutes yet before we have to be evicted. So
and sign petitions.
Yes.
Please sign petitions for them.
And then finally, just a special thank you to Anita Malik for being together for this town hall and giving CD-06 constituency the much needed and very rare opportunity to have a voice. It's been a long time, and we're very grateful. And before we go, we have one final polling question. Will you support Anita Malik against David Schweikert in 2020? Thank you all, and have a safe trip home.
If you have a pledge that's